Some people are just born storytellers. They weave their words together to hook you in, you never know what direction they're going to go next, and their enthusiasm leaves you wanting to hear just one more tale. And that's how Sean Bice has pretty much made a living. First in the ad agency world, and then with Yamaha, and now with MotoAmerica, Sean's passion is sharing stories. It helps that he's loved motorcycles his entire life. From his first machine, a Yamaha RD350, which he still has, he's loved everything two wheels, especially racing. And with 8 classes of racing in MotoAmerica, Sean's got plenty of stories to tell. Whether he's breaking the latest news on the MotoAmerica website or interviewing folks from all over the racing scene as half of the MotoAmerica podcast, Off Track with Carruthers and Bice, whatever Sean's talking about, you know you'll be entertained. When he's not writing or podcasting, Sean likes to head out on the perfect Sunday afternoon and just bomb around town, purely for the enjoyment of riding a motorcycle. This is Sean Bice. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. All right, Sean Bice, you were on the Driven to Ride podcast. Thank you for being here, sir.
Man, I'm so happy to be on with you. I get along with you great. We're like, I think we're brothers from another mother or something. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, so. Could be. So we met at the MotoGP race in Austin a little while ago, and yeah, we're both podcasters. We both love motorcycles, so naturally, it's we clicked right away. So yeah, but this one's about you, not about me. So let's just jump right in and start from the beginning. What do people most know you for, and what would you say in your own words as your claim to fame?
You know, there was a time there. I mean, I think when I worked for Yamaha as a press officer for them, there were a fair amount of people that knew me for that. And it was mostly because I not only did road racing, but I also did motocross and supercross and off-road ATV. So the various disciplines of racing, a lot of people got to know me as being kind of the Yamaha guy. But, you know, I've been doing MotoAmerica for about 8 years now. And I mean, that's my claim to fame, I think, because of the podcast we do, but also some of this stuff we do, the writing that I do that has my byline in it. I think if anybody knows me about anything, it's MotoAmerica for sure. So, yeah. Yeah.
8 years is a while. And yeah, you said Yamaha before that, but you weren't always in the power sports motorcycle industry, were you?
No, you know, I was one of those guys that was pressing my nose against the glass for the longest time. And, you know, I thought about this. I think the fact that when I was in college, in northern New York at a SUNY school called Potsdam State, small school, about 3,500 kids. And I met my wife there, who was a couple years younger than me. So when I went out into the world after I graduated, I kind of gravitated towards being an advertising copywriter. I was an English major in college, and I thought I was going to be in journalism, but it turned out that it wasn't that. So I started working for ad agencies. And then at the time, my wife, who was still in college, had an interest in living in New England. So I started looking for jobs over there, and I got a job with an ad agency in Manchester, New Hampshire. Well, lo and behold, that's about 45 minutes to an hour from Loudon, New Hampshire Motor Speedway is what they call it now.
Yeah.
And I think being close to there and having an interest in motorcycles, I would go up there for the Loudon Road Racing Series and see some of the guys racing on weekends. And, you know, I did a Keith Code school there once, but I decided pretty early on, I didn't want to race because I'm so fanatical about my motorcycles that I don't want to crash them.
Right.
I'm not so worried about myself, even though, you know, that should be a concern, but I don't like to mess up my bikes. They're usually pretty pristine. So I think being near there got me kind of involved in road racing. And of course, at that time, they had the Loudon, there was the Loudon National on Father's Day weekend. It was part of the AMA series. And from then on, I would go to that every year, never missed it. Until I ended up going through a headhunter and got a job in Manchester, New Hampshire. Manchester, New Hampshire is where I was. Mm-hmm. Got a job in, it was actually in north of Columbus. Why can't I think of the town right now? Worthington, Ohio. I went to work for an ad agency there, same kind of thing, but I moved up to a creative director position, still mostly copy based.
Sure.
But one of the reasons I was okay about going there is that's an hour from Mid-Ohio. And I used to hear all kinds of things from the riders and people that went with, you know, around with AMA at the time that said, oh my gosh, Mid-Ohio is like, you know, a country club. And so I moved to Ohio in 1997, started going to Mid-Ohio for all the nationals. Stopped going to New Hampshire, but then again, they actually stopped having AMA events there for various reasons, other than the fact that the track is pretty short. It's not a very long track. So
sure,
the super bikes were kind of outrunning it a little bit. And then lo and behold, after a while, we stopped going to Mid-Ohio. But at that point, I was kind of pretty deeply steeped in working in motorcycles. And it was because of me being a fan and getting to know some aspects of the paddock, the riders, the teams, that they got to know me a little bit. And then I started doing stuff, for Yamaha for a long time. I worked with a guy named Bob Starr, who is still there. He was a national advertising manager at one time, but he's kind of a legend. He's on the verge of probably retiring in the next couple of years. But Bob's pretty well known to a lot of people. And Bob, I have to credit for the one that got me going in that direction. And he got me the job at Yamaha back in 2011.
Oh, no way.
They needed somebody to be the press officer because they had just gotten Monster Energy for a title sponsor, and Monster Energy required that they do promotion. So
sure.
I did all press releases, and we did a lot of social media in those days. So that's kind of what got me started. I went from being a fan to working for one of the OEMs to now working for the racing organization for MotoAmerica. And road racing is by far my favorite thing. I like supercross and all that other stuff, but it's just something about road racing. I just love it so much.
Sure. Well, how did you become, obviously you're a motorcyclist and we'll get into your personal motorcycling history, but how did you become a fan of motorcycle racing?
I think it's because of probably the fact that I was near Loudon, and that idea that I could go up there, I could ride my motorcycle up there, and, on race weekends where it was club racing, Loudon Road Racing Series. And I could watch these guys race around the track. And I can't deny there was one point when I thought, maybe I should try that.
Sure.
But like I said, I just never wanted to take that leap because, I cared too much about my bikes. And, some of these guys would wad these motorcycles, and they'd be mostly okay. But, I think just number one, the competition. I've always been into sports, huge NFL fan, love kind of all kinds of competitive stick and ball sports.
Sure.
But racing is like the ultimate competition. I mean, what is it? Hemingway. I think he's the one that said bullfighting and racing are the only true sports because you actually can die in those sports.
Right.
So, or paraphrasing something to that effect, but his idea was, it's truly competition because there's a lot of risk involved in it, I guess, for the reward. Yeah. So I just admire these guys. They do things I couldn't even hope to do on a motorcycle. It's incredible.
It's insane to see. And I think the second half of that quote is everything else is just a game.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
You'll have to thank Dennis Noyes. He's the one who actually shared that quote with me. So.
Oh yeah. Dennis is a perfect one for that because I'm sure that probably defines his love of racing too.
Yeah, exactly. So he busted that out first. So we'll have to both thank him for finishing that quote for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So then you became a fan of racing just kind of almost by proximity and just the enjoyment of the sport. So how'd you get into motorcycling then, from the get-go?
Well, it's funny. I think about a couple of reasons why. When I was a kid, probably before I even knew that I liked it, one Christmas, I remember my father, my brother and I were 2 years apart. So basically anything that they got me, they got my brother. So we were very equal about that. And my brother and I both got those, ours was a 2.5 horse Tecumseh mini bike, tubular frame, not much for brakes on it. And we didn't have a lot of land, but we had a little bit of land. And we used to ride mini bikes around. But I don't know. I just enjoyed that. And at the same time, I lived in a very, very small town in northern New York, about 50 people in my town. And most of my neighbors were farmers. My father was a mechanical engineer and worked at a factory in the city nearby, which is Ogdensburg, New York, which is barely a city. But he worked for a company called ACO International, which made office supplies and notebooks. But he engineered these machines that would make these products. And so he had a mechanical background, and he was a woodworker. And I think he always wanted me to get involved in woodworking. But I don't like woodworking at all. It's an inexact thing to me.
Right.
I mean, wood warps. It doesn't go together the way you expect it to. And it's the very thing my dad loves about it, is it's so natural. Well, I'm all about making sure everything is drilled and tapped and fits together precisely. And you're talking about thousandths of an inch and it goes the way you're supposed to. And that's the mechanical side of it that I love, which I think my dad had too.
Sure.
So anyway, like I say, there were a lot of farms that were in the area. And the thing you did in the summer is you worked on the farms in the area. You were hired by farmers, if they had kids that were friends of yours, you would work with your friends. But
sure, yeah.
The hardest work I ever did was working on farms and putting up hay and, triple degree temperatures in the hay mows. And these were dairy farms. And back then they were 50 to 60 head of cattle. It's not like it is now where, some farmers have like 200 or whatever.
Yeah, it's not huge, but still pretty big.
Yeah, it was all stanchion barns where, the cows would come in, they'd go into their stanchion, they'd eat their grain, they'd be milked, and then they'd go back out again. But when you had to go and gather up the cows and get them in, you would ride on motorcycles, dirt bikes.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yeah. And my neighbor, Phil Bain, they had a Kawasaki KE 175. He rode it all over the place. So I rode it all over the place. This was around 14, 15 years old.
Sure.
So when I got to be 16, I had ridden motorcycles enough that I wanted to get a street bike. And I have to credit my dad. My birthday's in July. And in July 13th, 1976, I turned 16 years old. And I wanted to get a motorcycle. And my dad was cool enough to go, well, I'll pay for half, you pay for half, but you have to take care of this bike.
Sure.
And we went to Sovie's Cycle Shop in Canton, New York. And the reason we went there is because they had Yamaha snowmobiles. And prior to this time, my dad had bought a couple Yamaha snowmobiles. And that's what we did in the winter, because winters are long, cold, and a lot of snow in northern New York.
Sure, yeah.
And we got interested in snowmobiling. We'd all, in a group of people, go out in the woods and stop, build a fire, have hot dogs or whatever, and then go home after that. We used to do it a lot. And that kind of also grew my interest in motorized vehicles. And so I think because of this Yamaha snowmobiles, Dad said, we've had good luck with those snowmobiles. So there was this 1-year-old Yamaha RD350 at Sovie's Cycle Shop, and it only had about 200 miles on it. And they traded it in because the guy who had it, his wife, it was just too much for her. And I didn't realize at the time that, that bike's kind of notorious now for being, two-stroke twin.
Right.
It spawned the RZ350 and, the legend that bike was. So my first motorcycle was a 1975 RD350B, Portuguese orange. The last year of the 350,
yeah.
They came out with the 400 in 1976, the year that I turned 16. I had this 1-year-old motorcycle, and I still have it, Mark, to this day.
Wow, no way.
It's out in my garage, and it's in a bubble. I have it in a bubble because my dad, like I said, he told me, if I'm going to pay half of this, you need to take care of it.
Yeah.
So every time my dad would come down here to visit, I would take him out in the garage, and we'd go and look at this bike on display. And, I rode it a lot. I mean, sure. I didn't ride it ridiculously a lot. I will say it's got about 15,000 miles on it. It's not crazy high mileage.
Yeah.
Because I started to acquire other motorcycles. And this one, I did have to do a little bit of restoration on it. Not too bad, but it's literally a showroom bike now.
Really? That's cool.
And unfortunately I don't ride it. It's a garage queen at this point. I go out, I genuflect to it, and it's where I got started. I have a lot of memories of that motorcycle, but that really is where it got started with me. And it also is where I started kind of my Yamaha fandom as well. I've always liked that brand a lot. And you and I have talked about your FJ 1200, which
right.
I'm a big fan of. So the minute I saw it, I knew what it was. But I would say a combination of all those things: having a mini bike, riding a snowmobile in the winter, working on a farm where they had dirt bikes, and then my father. I have to credit my mom and dad for even allowing me to do this. I mean,
sure.
I go through hearing stories about parents that don't want their kids to do this, and I get it. But my mom and dad never did that with me. They never gave me a hard time, and I did have my one kind of crash, if you want to say it, was a week before I went to college, and I ended up, breaking an ankle, and it wasn't really all that bad, but I went to college with a cast on.
Yeah.
And not a bad way to meet the freshman girls. I got them to all sign my cast.
You're that guy. Yeah.
yeah. I was like, hey, here, I started out that way. And so, that's really the only one big crash I've had in my life. Thankfully. And it's just spawned now. I see motorcycles, and I don't want to get rid of my old ones because I love them so much. So I've got a garage with a bunch of them in it at this point.
Right. Yeah. So, you mentioned MotoAmerica. That's who you are working for now. Which sounds like an awesome job. How'd you kind of get involved with them?
Well, so that was interesting too. I think this was again, you were asking me what I'm known for. And I mean, there was a time where I was kind of known as this press officer for Yamaha, and everybody in MotoAmerica, and I say everybody meaning the officials and staff, I mean, they all knew me. Well, plus Wayne Rainey's always been a huge personal hero of mine. And I've made a point to try to talk to him when I can. And, I'm still that way. I still, when I see him, I have questions for him that I just save up to talk to him about.
Sure.
But when Wayne, started the series, I had written to him, I had contact information from him just from my years of relationship. And I said, man, I'm so glad you're taking this over. It's really going to be great. And, Yamaha, I was working for them on a contractual basis. And in March of 2018, the contract was coming up for renewal. And Yamaha at the time was in kind of transition. They moved their operations from Cypress, California to, the area outside of Atlanta anyway, but Kennesaw, Georgia. They're in Marietta, I think, or Marietta, whichever one it is. Mm-hmm. And, they moved a lot of their operation down there, which is where their ATVs and things are built here in the U.S.
Okay.
So the company became in transition. So they kind of eliminated that position I had. And so at the time, this is interesting. I never even had to pick up a phone. It was less than 24 hours. My phone rang, and it was Wayne. And he said, hey, I heard you're not going to be working with Yamaha. And he said, no, he said, it's horrible. I said, it's horrible. And he goes, well, listen, how would you like to come to work for us? And I said, are you kidding me? That's like, that's like even more of what I'm all about.
Right. Right.
So I came to work as kind of an assistant to Paul Carruthers, our communications manager. And, it just became obvious pretty quickly that there was a need for more than one person in that role, to keep the website going, to keep the content on social media going, and a lot of other things. I mean, I'm even involved in now, they send me the entry lists ahead of time. I happen to be sort of a pretty good proofreader. So
okay.
I can I'm able to find mistakes that people can't really find. It's kind of a weird thing with me. So they've taken advantage of that. And like, I look at the entry lists before really anybody else does, and make sure they're right, so that when they're released, names are spelled right, towns are spelled right, motorcycles are referred to right. And that's part of my job too. I mean, so it's, you kind of adapt to whatever your skills are at a place sometimes. Primarily I was the storyteller, and I still do that. I still do a lot of writing for the website, but there are other aspects of the job that I try to do to kind of occupy my time. And it's a year-round job, even though our series has 9 rounds. I mean, we're very, very busy in the off season too, working on all kinds of things, whether it's, making announcements for the season for next year. The class is changing, trying to find out who the riders are going to be for the next year. And it's just year round. There's always something going on.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I came to be where I'm at now. And I mean, it really is, I've finally arrived at something that really is part and parcel of who I am as a human being. So I really enjoy it. It's terrific stuff. Yeah. Even the bad stuff, Mark. Sometimes, every job's got some bad stuff, right? Sometimes I go like, well, son of a, but then later on I'm like, but this is the greatest job in the world, So,
right.
So I never lose track of that overarching idea that I'm really doing what I should be doing.
Yeah. If the worst part of the best job in the world, I mean, it makes you laugh afterwards, it really can't be that bad, like you said. So
100%. I can pivot right away from that fairly quickly,
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes my passion can get the best of me.
Sure.
Passion is funny. It's like what love and hate are emotions that are very close together. It doesn't take much to separate the two. Sometimes my passion can get the best of me if, something doesn't go quite the way I want it to or whatever. But I try to temper that with as much of, look, you're actually being paid to do this job, Sean. I mean, and you love it. So, and they know I do. So it's a good situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the ways that, you can share your passion is on your podcast. Cause like I said, you're a fellow podcaster. So tell me about Off Track with Carruthers and Bice, how that got started and what you guys do.
It's funny. It started fairly early, and I don't remember if it was Paul or me, but it got started fairly soon after I went to work for MotoAmerica. And I think Paul and I just said, we probably ought to do a podcast. Well, the irony is the very week that, not the very week, the very week that we did our first episode, and we're approaching 300 episodes now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're up in the high 280s at this point. The very first week that we were doing this, unbeknownst to us, and we had talked to the partners and said, hey, we're going to be doing this podcast focused on MotoAmerica. Well, lo and behold, Greg White and Jason Pridmore also launched their own podcast.
Oh, right.
Now their podcast is a little different from us, because even though they work for MotoAmerica, they talk about MotoGP and World Superbike, and they kind of run the realm of racing, and we do a little bit, but really more as it pertains to MotoAmerica.
Sure.
And that's kind of the niche I want to stick to, because I just feel like there are so many stories to tell in MotoAmerica. I mean, we have over 150 riders that compete in our 8 classes of racing. And I mean, you think about it, everybody has a story, and everybody deserves to have that story told. And I want to do that. I want to get there. And by the time you get through those people, well, some of them will have probably retired or stopped racing, and there's a new crop. So it's always changing. It's always new. And everybody's got something to say. And we want to do that. Whether through the podcast, through stories on our website, through the bio that we have, we have a section of bios for our riders. We're trying to get the word out about them, because they are the most important asset of MotoAmerica. If we don't have racers, we don't have anything.
Yeah, you don't have any
pretty
races.
Obvious.
Yeah, for sure.
Nothing at all. Yeah. So, we value that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you interview riders every time? Do you interview all kinds of guests? Do you guys, I think I've heard you guys go back and forth on a couple different things on some episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I think primarily it's riders, but heck, we've talked to people within MotoAmerica. I mean, we've talked to our technical director, Teague Daney. We've talked to our race director, Rick Hobbs. We talked to some people within our organization, and sometimes we talk to them when something's come up, like a rule change or a technical change. We've had Chuck on a few times. Chuck's a big proponent of our Mini Cup series, so we've had him come on to talk about his passion for that. We've had Wayne on a little bit. Yeah, I mean, we try to cover a lot of different areas. We've had crew chiefs on. We've had team owners on. And that's the thing, Mark. I mean, it's 150 riders, but I can't say that we've had a lot of moms and dads on to talk about their kid racing,
sure,
unless those moms and dads are team owners. But generally the team owners are like, Michael Kiley, the owner of Tytler's Cycle, or one of their crew people, or one of the Attack crew people, Superbike, because obviously Superbike's our premier class. So we try to defer to that as much as possible. Sure. But again, there are stories to be told. Heck, we recently had Justin Meest, who's a Stock 1000 rider from Minnesota. Okay. And he's a club racer who races at Brainerd all the time. Brainerd was his home track, but he also races with us. So we didn't know a lot about Justin Meest. Well, it turns out Justin Meest just started a company where he markets and sells parts for small garden tractors, like these Mahindras and stuff like that. And they create and design attachments for these tractors that have like PTOs on the back or hydraulic connections or whatever. Anything from buckets to plows to carts, trailers, whatever they need to do. So Justin told us about that and how that's his business. That's what he does during the day so that he can race on weekends and with MotoAmerica. And we had never talked to him before, but he's a super smart guy. And he gave us a nice perspective of what it's like to be a privateer racer, racing with just his wife, and he's got a crew chief who's a friend of his who they used to race together and still do at Brainerd. So it's really grassroots racing, and then we got some of the factory stuff as well. So it is the gamut, but I'll talk to anybody. I really will. The big thing about me is I like to ask a lot of questions. Sure. This is a little different for me, although I'm obviously talking a mile a minute. Talking about myself, I much prefer to ask, what makes other people tick. Sure. Because I'm fascinated with how people's brains work.
Yeah.
Everybody's different.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody's wired differently, and
everybody's wired differently.
I'm sure there's many different reasons somebody would strap themselves to a motorcycle and go 100, 150, 200 miles an hour. So
yeah. And that itself is just such a fascinating thing for me, I mean, and then, they wear great equipment and they usually protect themselves and are in good shape. Sometimes they get injured, but they'll break a bone or something. How quickly can I get back on the motorcycle? And it means that much to them. And I really applaud that level of passion for anything, really.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's very impressive.
It really is. It really is. And I mean, you've seen some of our finishes that we've had with close, within thousands, these photo finishes. It's just incredible that you can do 16 laps around a 4-mile course and end up that you have to have a photo finish at the end to decide who won the thing. I mean, no amount of length of track or number of laps seems to change the fact that this competition is absolutely fierce.
Oh yeah,
from beginning to end,
and it doesn't make it any less exciting. I mean, racing is exciting pretty much every race you see. So,
absolutely.
Talking about you mentioned the Junior Cup. You talked about World Superbike, Stock 1000s. You've got a lot of different classes in MotoAmerica. Can you kind of run me through what all those classes are?
Yeah, absolutely. I will. So I'm going to start from entry level to premier.
Perfect.
Our entry level class right now is Junior Cup, and it's actually being replaced next year by the MotoAmerica Talent Cup. That will also be an entry level class, but that starts with 14 years old. Now, 14 to 25, I think is the age limit on that. And I'll also get into a little bit about Mini Cup after this too, Mark, because I'm talking about on kind of the big track. So Junior Cup, after that, and I'm going to do it in order of maybe how I see it. The next class up, I would say, is it's called Bellissimoto. They're a manufacturer of, they're a retailer of aftermarket parts. They might make their own a little bit, but they also are kind of known for a lot of different Italian parts for bikes, anything from clip-ons to chains to, street bike related stuff, race bike related stuff. They are a title sponsor for our Twins Cup class.
Okay, cool.
And Twins Cup is only 2-cylinder motorcycles of a certain displacement around 650 cc's up to maybe, I think, 850, something like that. So they're considered middleweight twin-cylinder motorcycles. Up from that is our Super Sport class, which is that's a legacy class that's been around for probably since around 18, gosh, not that long. Around 1989, 88, something like that is when the AMA started the 600 Super Sport class. Primarily, they've been these 600cc motorcycles, also considered middleweight, and very enjoyable for consumers to buy because they're a little bit less expensive.
Sure.
They're a little bit less intimidating because they're smaller, but yet they're pretty amazing on a racetrack. And our Super Sport has become what the FIM, the International Federation of Motorcycles, considers to be Super Sport Next Generation. So they've decided that in this formula, a 955 V-twin Panigale Ducati fits in it.
Oh, wow.
A 636cc Kawasaki, a 750cc Suzuki, still a 599cc Yamaha R6, which they don't make for the street anymore.
Right.
But through the magic and the science of balancing all these motorcycles through the usage of electronically limiting some of the motorcycles, providing weight to some of them.
Okay.
They're all balanced out. So it's kind of become a mishmash, but that class is the one that had that crazy photo finish at Road America, where it was the closest finish. It was 0.0007.
Wow.
Tenths of a seven, whatever, 10,000ths of a second.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Wow.
It was faster than a bumblebee can beat its wing. That's how quick that's how quick those two bikes cross the line apart from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it turned out that, a winner was declared in it. And Tyler Scott won the race over Matthew Skoltz and PJ Jacobson. So Yeah, it was an incredible thing to see. There's no doubt about it. And that just goes to show you that balancing in that class, even though it's disparate sizes and configurations of engines, it works pretty darn well.
Yeah, and it still comes down to the rider.
Yeah, absolutely. The rider for sure. After that, we have Stock 1000, which is essentially their leader bikes. They're essentially what super bikes are, except they have to be more close to what you would buy in a showroom.
Okay.
There's a few things they can do. They can change some things like brakes, but they can't really do much engine work on them. They can't change things like swing arms and all the things that the super bikes do. But they're very competitive. Then we have Superbike, which is our premier class. And that's, the fire breathing, 220 to 250 horsepower, generally leader bikes, even though the Ducati is, I think it's a little under 1,000 cc's, but that's a 4-cylinder a V4.
Right.
But again, those bikes are all kind of balanced as well. And that's the absolute peak of our series. And then we have the Mission King of the Baggers series, which is the truly American, 2 American brands of V-twin touring motorcycles,
Yeah.
Indian and Harley Davidson. Indian has the Challenger. Harley Davidson has the Road Glide. Both those motorcycles, they're V-twin engines, but they're quite different. Indian's engine is liquid cooled. It's got a few more advancements in it. Harley's is an air cooled with two. I have to couch this a little bit, Mark. It's an air cooled V-twin, but they actually have a little bit of liquid cooling in them. It's called twin cooled. They actually cool the exhaust valves on that engine with a small radiator. So it's something a lot of people don't realize. But the majority of the engine in the architecture is air cooled. And the engine on the Harley is allowed to rev a little bit higher than the one on the Indian because it's kind of balanced out. But it's only 2 makes. It's a civil war. It's American big twins, one against the other. And, the factories are involved, and also Vance and Hines and a couple other companies, S&S Cycle. There are companies that do a lot of supplying of parts to these brands to Harley Davidson and Indian that are involved as well. And they're developing race parts, which are actually being used on the street quite a bit now. So the new thing now is for people to buy these touring bikes and actually, trick them out and put a little bit more performance in them. Because everybody wants to do more with their street bike, right? They want to make it faster. They want to make it louder. They want to do whatever. So this series is actually starting to improve the breed and the state of the art in those motorcycles. Racing does that.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes for a better motorcycle, obviously. And that's what's happening in this class as well.
Yeah, and it's something that if you've never seen it, you've got to see it at least once, whether on video or in person. I mean, it's just as ridiculous and fun either way. I mean, obviously in person, you can't beat it, but it's the most unique kind of racing I think I've seen in a long, long time. Yeah,
we debuted it a few years ago at Laguna Seca. We had 1 round and there was a lot more. Now it's kind of pared down as anything happens, and improves the breed. We had all kinds of stuff in that race. We had a turbocharged motorcycle, turbocharged. I think it was a Harley. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Trask Performance makes turbos for Harleys. So they put one on one of the bikes. They had all kinds of different seating positions. It was pretty wild at that first race. And I remember thinking, well, this is pretty weird. I mean, these bikes, I don't really even ride these bikes,
Sure.
Your feet are out in front of you. It's not a sporty style. It's just different. And I was fixated from then on, and it's evolved over time. And then we have the Royal Enfield Build Train Race, which is back. Royal Enfield helped create this, and they do it in flat track as well as road racing. They select a number of women. This year they selected 13, some of which competed last year. But they all start out on a Royal Enfield Continental GT 650, which is a vertical twin 650cc motorcycle that's kind of a throwback to the days of the Triumphs.
Sure. Yeah.
Upright cylinder, air cooled, the whole bit. These happen to be fuel injected, but they get the bike, they race prep the bike, which means they'll convert it. They'll put lower handlebars on it, different kinds of rear sets, foot pegs, to try to get it more racy. put body work on it. They all have like a bikini fairing on the front of them. And then they customize them with whatever color they want and pick their number and design their number on there.
Nice.
Then they go and they train at a couple of track days. And then we put them out on the track and they race. And it's been pretty impressive. And it isn't really a stepping stone to other classes, but it can be. Michaela Moore, who won every race in Build Train Race last year, and is obviously a good road racing lady, woman. She raced in Twins Cup at a recent round, and she's probably going to move up next year because they can only race 2 years in Build Train Race.
Okay, but
she showed she's got the racecraft to race anything, and in our series, so she's gonna absolutely do that. We've got one rider, Sonia Lloyd, who raced last year. She finished, I think, second or third in the championship. She's actually racing in Twins Cup this year for a team. So she's not involved in Build Train Race anymore. She's technically a professional racer in MotoAmerica now. So it is a stepping stone, even though it's not necessarily intended to be that way. It's intended to be a first foray for women who want to try road racing. And there's no shortage of that because they get a lot of applicants every year. And the ones that are selected are a chosen few. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like a select few. And I was actually lucky enough to see them race at Road America last year up in Wisconsin. Which was really cool to see. And they are fast, man.
Yeah, they do it's fun to watch them race together because they almost look at each other and realize, hey, I can go probably a little bit faster because this one's kind of closing in on me. They don't know their limits yet. So during the season, we watch them go faster and faster, lap by lap, and also round by round. It's quite a thing to watch. It's very enjoyable.
Yeah. So that rounds out the classes then that MotoAmerica has.
Yes, that's right. And we also have Mini Cup, which is something that we've embraced over the past few years, which is racing smaller motorcycles on kart tracks.
Okay.
So yeah, we do that. There is a track at Road America. Actually, that's where we're having our Mini Cup National Final this year.
Oh, wow.
In August. And basically what this is you qualify at various regional rounds around the country. And all this information is on MotoAmerica's website. And you earn points. And when you get to the national final at Road America, you already start with 10 points that weekend. And you compete with everybody else around the country for the top three, I think, are sent to Europe to race in the FIM Mini World Series.
Wow. Okay.
Which are these motorcycles. Yeah. But they start out from 5 to, I think 14 is the cutoff. I'm pretty sure. In some classes you can race longer, but in fact, there's even a class called Street GP where you, Mark, could race in it.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, they're little 125 Hondas and Yamahas and Kawasaki's, and you can go out there and race because I think the age limit might be like 55 or something like that.
Oh, cool.
But the class is primarily for young kids. It's to give them their first taste of road racing, even before they race on our larger tracks in our Junior Cup Series, which is our entry level. But there's a pre-entry level. Let me put it that way. Just
so I heard you right. You said like 5 years old is the lower age cutoff.
5 years old. Some of these kids, I've seen this.
Yeah.
Some of these kids literally they can't touch the ground. So they literally get on some of these bikes and they're held up at the start line by their parents.
Jeez.
And they gas it and take off. And at the end of the race, somebody catches them so that they don't tip over.
Talk about a lucky childhood, I guess, if you like motorcycles, man.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, this kind of paradigm is sort of the way it works in motocross. Kids start on dirt bikes from, we're trying to preempt that a little bit. We're not trying to take the place of it.
Sure.
But we're trying to give these kids an option where if they want to road race,
sure,
instead of race motocross that young, obviously these guys grow up to become amazing supercross riders. But that type of racing, those guys are kind of done by the time they're in their, if anything, they're low 30s.
Right.
Some of our racers race a lot longer than that. There's more longevity in road racing, I think, just because of the nature. It's a little less physical than what you see out on Supercross where they're doing all those crazy jumps and everything.
Yeah.
So it's for sure, it's not even a young men's sport or young women's sport. It's a young person, younger than young sometimes. but we want a piece of that, because there are some parents and some kids at a young age that they don't really want to do off-road. They want to road race.
Sure.
So they will start. We have an opportunity for them to get involved with us at the same young age that they would on a dirt bike. So that's kind of the deal.
What kind of riding do you like to do?
I like to go out on a perfect Sunday afternoon and just bomb around town, go out road. I'm not a big touring rider.
Sure.
I don't ride long distances, and it's because I sometimes feel like if I wanted to do that, it's more comfortable in a car, and I could sit there and talk to my wife. Sure. I mean, there are these communication devices on a motorcycle, so you can have conversations. But for me, I used to commute, but I work from home now. I would commute on a motorcycle a lot of times in the summer. And I like the fact that you could save some money on gas with that whole thing. But for me, I like to just go out on 2-3 hour rides in the general vicinity, not like real far. And that's the core for me at this point. Come back and clean all the bugs off the bike, get it pristine again, and have it back in the driveway, or back in the garage, I guess. I've sometimes felt like I've limited myself. I've stolen some of my joy of motorcycling by not riding as much as I should or could. Sure. And I don't know if at some point I'm going to regret that. But I mean, for me, I just like to be comfortable and riding in a car with air conditioning on a real long distance just feels better to me. I don't know. It's just my thing. Sure. Some people love to go the long distances and crank up the miles. I mean, a lot of our people in our paddock, Mark Miracle, who is one of our pastors, that guy rides his FJR 1300 all over from round to round. And, he's always replacing tires. You know how quickly you go through tires on a motorcycle. Right. He just rides everywhere. And, he's got great adventures and stories to tell. Sure. And I do envy him a little bit, but at the same time, I arrive kind of comfortable, and I've had the air conditioning on. I've been listening to tunes. Life is good. So,
well, I think sometimes people forget that you can just ride a motorcycle for fun and for pleasure. You don't necessarily have to go race it or tour it or prove to yourself that you can do it. You can just enjoy the ride, on a weekend.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And it's one of those classic things where it's not the destination. It's the journey. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of something that I know touring riders think about too. They're going to get to a destination in their mind, but the journey along the way is what it's all about. My journey just happens to be a little bit shorter, but I still, I'll go by, I'll take the same route all the time. And I enjoy that too, because you kind of get used to the feel of it. And, you could kind of improve your skills going through those areas as much as you can. So there's a lot of parts about that I really enjoy. The one thing I wish I did was track days. And again, it goes back to me I don't want to wreck a motorcycle, but man, I'd love to go out on a track and just kind of ride around and see, feel what those racers are feeling and, see what kind of lap times I can do. I'm stifling myself too much, Mark.
Well,
that's what it is.
Well, it's never too late. So I've never done.
That's true.
I've never done a track day either. So maybe we can collaborate and have our first track days together, and maybe even on somebody else's motorcycles. So then, if we dump them, there's no big deal.
You have figured it out. That's what I need to do: smash up somebody else's bike. Yeah. And hopefully not hurt myself. But that's the thing. I mean, track days. There are people out there that buy motorcycles not even to ride them on the street. They'll just only do track days. Right. You see people that show up at tracks. We see that all the time in MotoAmerica. The people will be coming in on Sunday night when we're loading out, and we know there's a track day the next day. Wow. You'll see people come in with, trailers with their motorcycles, and, they got high-end Ducatis and Aprilias and all kinds of stuff, and they only ride those motorcycles out on the track at a track day, and, they get what they want out of it, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, man, a track day sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. There's no speed limit. There's perfect track and perfect tarmac, no traffic. And you mean, really, if you're just doing it for fun, you're really only competing against yourself.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, we should do it, Mark.
So maybe
that's what we need to do.
Maybe we can do an off track, on track, driven to ride collaboration. So
yeah, that would be fun.
So I have to ask too, being in your position and a rider for pleasure, do you think motorcycling helps with writer's block?
It must, because I never get writer's block. It's the weirdest thing.
Really?
I'm telling you, I never have had that happen. And, again, I don't know, knock on granite. I'm sitting at a granite table here. I mean, I don't know. It could happen. But maybe so. Maybe because I go out and clear my head. I will tell you those times on my job that I love with all my heart, but there's something that's bugging me about that job. I will tell you, getting on a motorcycle and going out for a while and just bombing around sure clears your head.
Yeah.
It's great therapy for that kind of stuff. But no, I'm sure it could help with writer's block. I mean, just getting out there and, being in nature and even the smells, what it's like.
Yeah.
You're riding along on a motorcycle. Somebody just mowed the lawn. It's the greatest smell in the world. It's so good. Or when you go down in those valleys where it gets kind of cool, you're riding along and then all of a sudden, I love that. I mean, that'll cure writer's block if anything does, I mean, it's just all of a sudden you're like, wow, that feels pretty good. That's nice and comforting. I mean, even last night I went out and rode around for a while and I got home and I was kind of giggling in my helmet just because, it's an indescribable feeling of, I don't know, freedom, joy, that feeling of going back and forth like that. It just feels so good.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I was gonna ask you what makes motorcycling so special to you, but I guess you beat me to the punch there. So,
well, honestly, there's so much of it. Not only the riding portion of it, but like I said, I mean, I love the mechanical aspects of it. I just love the way a motorcycle works, how it runs, what propels it forward. The electronics I'd like to know more about, but it's kind of a black art for me.
Sure.
But things like, adjusting a chain or those kind of things. I don't do heavy mechanics on a motorcycle. I'm just a little afraid to do that. Plus not having the equipment.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of my own maintenance and I can do stuff like, even if, put new piston rings in a 2-stroke or something, I can do that.
Okay.
I don't usually get that involved in engine stuff.
Sure.
But, maintenance is a big part of it for me. And just, always having a clean motorcycle and one that's, adjusted to spec is a big thing for me. And that's a joy of motorcycling for me as well.
I love it. Well, I think that's the perfect way to end. So, Sean, thank you so much for your time. And before I let you go, how can we listen to Off Track with Carruthers and Bice?
So Off Track with Carruthers and Bice, we have a link on our website, which is MotoAmerica.com. And I encourage you to go to that website because I have a lot of byline stories in there, but you can read all about our riders and what's going on. But also it's on, I think it's on Spotify and basically wherever you go to find your podcast.
Sure.
I usually go to Apple, but you can go on YouTube. We put it on YouTube as well and just type in Off Track. And generally at this point with Carruthers and Bice will come up, but sometimes you might have to type a little more, but it'll usually come up pretty quickly. Cause like I say, we've got 280 some podcasts at this point. And I've heard you, Mark, you might know this better than me. In fact, I bet you do. Some people like podcasts, that many episodes. There aren't a ton of podcasts out there that have that many episodes, I've heard.
No, I was going to say, if you guys have done it for that long and done that many, I mean, that's impressive. And I think you've got a thing going, so you should keep at it.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do it every week and we can't help but do it. It's really fun. In fact, the times that we haven't done it in a week because of something that happened, like we didn't do it at Brainerd because I just wasn't feeling well and Paul didn't think, wanting to do it. It was kind of weird to not have it that week, and people were asking, where's the podcast? I'm like, oh, I let you guys down. So yeah, doing it every week. It's cool to have something like that you could just keep going with, and it's part of our lifestyle now to do what we do.
Yeah. So, we'll make sure we link to it too. And make sure that anybody can check it out that wants to. So again, Sean, thank you so much for being here and for the time. And can't wait to do a track day with you.
I love it. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk soon, Sean. Thank you.
All right. See you later. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts too. If you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure, email us hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC, made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.